This podcast is brought to you by the letters KYLT. Episode 2 of our conversation around the golden age of KYLT radio and top 40 music, and we're going to take a little bit of a left turn this morning with a conversation with the longtime voice of the Montana Grizzlies, Grizzly Bill Schwanke, and Toby is with you as well. So Toby's your pup. Oh, look at those eyes. It's a twofer, folks. So, but we're going to focus on Bill. Thank you so much, Mr. Schwanke, for being here. You and I go back a lot of years and worked together for a few years. When I was a part-timer, I was so impressed with working with you and having you do the sports when I was on the air. Want to hear all about KYLT and your early days and when you honed your skills as a play-by-play broadcaster and announcer for Loyola. So, Bill Schwanke, tell me something I don't know, which is probably a lot.
Well, first of all, I have to admit that I really don't actually remember the exact circumstance when Vern Argo and I hooked up, and the exact date that happened. But I think it was while I was still in college. And somehow he asked me if I'd be interested in being on the air, and somehow that turned into me becoming a disc jockey. Station there, we'd sign off at midnight. The early years were pretty incredible because our studio was in an old trailer house out near the Missoula cemetery.
Okay.
And the tower
on Otis Street.
Yes, and it was the tower was right behind us in the studio. I mean, I'd sit at the console there, and right behind me was the transmitter, which actually was handy in the winter because it kept it warm. But it was also a hotbed for mice who wanted to hide. And we would feed the mice. I would feed the mice crumbs from any food I might have in there. We didn't have the silly rule about not having any food in the studio.
Right.
But and I do remember one time we did try to take requests. So the commercials we played were on small reel-to-reel things, and we would have to queue up. While one commercial was playing for 30 seconds, we'd have to queue up another one on another tape player. And so it was pretty interesting doing that. But one night I didn't honor somebody's request. And the next thing I knew, somebody had thrown actually an empty beer bottle at the window of the studio.
My goodness.
It didn't break the window, but it was definitely a wake-up call. I was just hoping that somebody named Bruno wasn't going to come in the door and do something beyond throwing the bottle. So,
do you remember what the song was that they wanted you to play?
I wish I did. I wish I did, because I'd sure honor that request any other time afterwards. But those were really fun years. Another interesting story is KYLT didn't have the greatest. This is before Gene Peterson bought the station along with Bill Holter. You know, Tom Ash was around as our news guy, and there were some interesting characters. But when I was at university, I went to get some books for the coming quarter. We were on the quarter system then. And as I was getting ready to pay for the books, I looked up and there was a little thing above the cash register that said, "Do not accept checks from, these businesses," and KYLT was on the list. So then I had to scramble and go borrow the money from my dad, which I paid back later. But that was an interesting wake-up call as to the status of the station back then. We had a lot of listeners, but we didn't have a lot of money. We did a lot of trade-outs. I could get a haircut. I could get a breakfast, different things like that, but a larger paycheck was not in the offing back then. So then I started doing the Loyola games, and again, I think that may have been Vern. I think Vern might have had that idea. I might have started doing that when we were back in the trailer house. Regardless, I left college and immediately became the sports information director for the Grizzlies. And we didn't have a lot of sports back then, no women's sports, so it was a pretty easy job. And I had a wonderful boss there named Larry Stewart, who was very willing to let me sideline as a play-by-play announcer. So anyway, at that time, they played in the old Loyola gym, which is now it turned into Sacred Heart and Loyola. Yeah, and so the old gym was not a very wonderful place in terms of both odor and so I sat up in a kind of a corner balcony area there to call the games in Loyola gym. Football, can't even remember where I think they had Ramfield by then, but anyway, so I did a lot of, and you know, I go back to so many standard Loyola Catholic people who attended that school, and I still have conversations with a lot of those former players these days. You know, people like Russ Pilcher and the Schwanke family in particular. So I actually got my gas from the patriarch Jack Schwanke at his service station across from St. Pat. So a lot of connections there that have lasted for a long time.
So let's delve into a little bit of the play-by-play, Bill, because to hone that craft and to learn that's especially kind of on the fly in 67, 68, that era. I mean, how did you get to where you were? Because it was just a few years later that you actually, became the voice of the Grizzlies.
Yes, I know. And
for someone like myself that listened to you, I mean, I was like, this guy is so good. So you must have really ramped up pretty quickly.
Well, here's another interesting story that you'll bring out. When I was in my early years, probably mid-1950s, I got a board game called All-Star Baseball. And it was a little thing where they had little round things, and you'd have a spinner, and all the famous players, Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, all these players had their card, and there were several numbers of various sizes depending on their hitting prowess. On the outside of these little cards, you would spin, and it would tell you whether they got a home run,
neat,
whatever it might be. Well, I started announcing those games while I was playing All-Star Baseball, and that was my first experience. I had listened to people, several people on the radio doing play-by-play, but I think that was the original thing that started the bug for me. And then I had a chance when I was sports information director. Milt Schwanke was doing the games for KGVO back then, and I actually sat in with him. I sat in with Cato Butler a few times, a well-known name, and we became great friends. And, it was just those kind of things. But in reality, Scott, I think it was a gift.
Yeah.
I just think
it's you definitely have a natural born ability to do this and to tell a great story, Bill.
Yeah.
So it was such an honor to listen to you and work with you.
Yeah. But anyway, it was I think it was primarily a gift that I was able to build on in the future, obviously for a long time, and very thankful for that. To me, a gift is a blessing, and I was very blessed in that regard. So I
do remember reading that you would critique yourself quite a bit, that, you would air check most of your games and then listen to them afterwards. And, for anybody that's done radio, listening to yourself and listening to your air checks is always difficult. So if you did that on a regular basis, kudos to you. It shows.
I did that for many years. After every game, I would re-listen. And I was always amazed at some slip-up that I had that I didn't even realize occurred during the broadcast. But I was mainly trying to make sure I was doing a good job of calling the play-by-play. We didn't have TV back then. And the greatest compliment I've ever gotten from people was that I painted a picture for them on the radio. And you don't get that. You don't get that anymore because of simulcasting with TV is a lost art. Most of the people that do streaming games, even though there is a radio audience, basically ignore the radio audience.
They do. And and when TV first kind of came into vogue, and you were still kind of the big dog calling the game, we would say, hey, coming up this weekend, join Grizzly Bill Schwanke on the road in Idaho for the game with the Vandals. It'll be on TV, but go ahead and turn the TV down and listen to Grizzly Bill.
Yeah, well, I know my successor, Mick Holeen, that was one of the first things they said when they went on the air is turn the TV down. Sometimes it's hard to match the radio up, sync the radio with the TV.
True.
So, and they've developed methods so it's easier to do that. But so anyway, yeah, I had a cassette recorder. You may remember seeing it. It was kind of a rectangular black, kind of a hefty black thing.
I do.
And I would take that with me and I would record every game. There was an ironic situation when I did the UCLA basketball game in 1975 when Jud Heathcote was coaching here. I begged the studio announcer to make sure to record the game, and he got busy and it didn't get recorded. And it was many, many years later that a guy named Gwyn Watkins, he was actually blind, but he actually ran the 93 Stop and Go. Gwyn always recorded a lot of sports on these big reels, and somehow the word got to me that he had that game. And I finally ended up with he transferred it to a disc. I can't remember what he had to transfer it to.
My goodness.
I have no idea where it is. I'll have to, my kids will, after I kick the bucket.
You're not helping me, Bill.
Huh?
You're not helping me because I definitely want that broadcast.
Oh, well, I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, we would love it.
So anyway, that's kind of how the whole thing developed. Then in 1969, I was offered the job as sports editor of the Missoulian. And my goal, still sitting out there, was to be the voice of the Grizzlies. So I took the Missoulian job. I was probably the youngest sports editor the Missoulian has had ever. And that was an interesting job. I enjoyed it a lot. We had a wonderful staff down there, some old timers that were really really great, and I learned a lot from them. And my journalism degree obviously paid off for that. The one thing different about doing sports for a newspaper is once the game is over, your job is just starting. You have to go write a story. The thing I loved about play-by-play was when the game was over, you were done, and it was on to the next one, whenever that might be. So, but that experience was really good for me. I had taken a summer job during my school terms with the Great Falls Tribune. And I spent a summer over there. I got the only good suntan I ever had, mostly from the wind. But I remember the Tribune was I can't remember what the actual name is, but they were a union newspaper. So right after I got there to start the summer, they were about to go out on strike, which meant I would have two options. I could either cross the picket line and earn the money to go to school the next fall, or I could just, bag it. As it turned out, they got everything settled and I was able to work that summer. They had me penciled in. I went and covered some state union meeting. But I think they figured out fairly quickly over there that sports was my real deal, and I got to cover one of the East-West Shrine games in Great Falls and some other sports events. So that was just all part of building my background and my knowledge and everything else, and still have a lot of friends from back in those days. So anyway, 1971 comes along, and I knew Gene Peterson. I'd been in touch with him. I knew Gene had been trying to get the rights from KGVO, and KGVO slipped up because they stopped, to save money, I guess, stopped sending their announcer on road games. They took feeds when the Grizzlies played out of town, and that was the real bullet that Gene Peterson needed to make his strong run at the rights. He got those rights in 1971, and some tapes of me reading sports and different things for him. But, again, another blessing and almost a miracle in my view. As you mentioned, I was 20 whatever then, and my only experience was with Loyola High School. And no, I'm not trying to offend Loyola High School, but I didn't have a lot of play-by-play background, sitting in with Cato and Schwanke and stuff. But so Gene gave me the job, and of course, a few years later, I accused him of hiring me because I was cheap. He could get me for cheap.
Well, he had a habit of doing that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the nature of the business back then. But anyway, he told me, I mentioned that to him a few years later, and he said, you need to understand, I listened to you, seriously listened to you when you were doing Loyola games on the radio. And he said, I just felt like you had the ability to translate that into a college broadcast. I mean, it's the same thing. You're calling a game.
Yeah. Well, Gene was a talent. As long as I worked for Gene, I didn't know him that well, as a part-timer there on the weekends, but he did seem like a very wise man.
Yes.
That, he ran a good business.
Well, he ran a good business, and it was a struggling business for the first few years after he took it over. His wife, Rose, who's still with us, she did all the books, and she might have done all the logs and everything else. I don't know for sure. But
right.
It was a small, I don't want to say small time, but a small office, and they did a great job. And I owe everything to Gene Peterson, because if he hadn't been willing to do that, who knows what I would have been doing. I might still be at the Missoulian. Who knows?
Yeah, we all have those people in our background that, it's a positive right turn onto a very good path.
Yeah.
So,
one of the main things
you made it happen, Bill. I mean, not only did you do a wonderful job on the air, great ambassador for Montana sports and KYLT in general, but the day-to-day also of you coming in and doing sports and, being an employee Monday through Friday. I mean, that must have been a little bit of a grind.
Yeah, it was. But once they got the games, everybody knew that the main thing I was supposed to focus on was, for about 9 months of the year was Grizzly sports. Maybe not 9 months. Football, basketball, so it'd be September through March. So, yeah, I mean, everybody was very accepting. I had a great relationship with Ray Nicolai, and we teamed up to do news. I did quite a bit of news, not nearly as much as he did. We just had a really cool setup there. Peter Christian, I've got a funny story to tell about Peter and myself in the studio one time. But anyway, so off we went, and we were doing all this stuff. And so my first year doing play-by-play, 1971-72, as I told you earlier, was Jud Heathcote's first year as Grizzly basketball coach. And it was Robin Selvig's first year playing on the Grizzly varsity. Freshmen weren't allowed to play then. So that was his sophomore season. So that's how far back I go with Robin. And Jud, of course, made the comment that he would never recruit another Class C basketball player. But Robin kind of showed him what's what. Jud was very intimidating. He was a hard-nosed coach. There were a couple of players, I won't mention their names, but they couldn't handle it, and they just quit. He was brutal. And Robin had a little of that in him as a result. He was pretty he could be pretty brutal with the ladies later too. But anyway, Jud was, we were friends for years after that. But a funny story about Jud, he had a habit of, so I would do a pregame show with Jud in the motel before we went to the site, usually in his room. And I would pull up a chair and face him and have the recorder going. And Jud had this habit of leaning over and tugging on his socks, the top of his socks, while he was answering my questions. And I was so tempted sometimes to just slowly back up and see if he would just tip over. But I also realized I was taking my life in my hands if I did that. So the other thing that happened with Jud is the first road trip we took, Gene would give me cash to take for food and everything. Not a lot, but he would give me, a lot of times the coaches would invite me to team lunches and stuff. But so anyway, we get to the Seattle airport, and one of the deals we had to help them out at the university was that it was part of the contract is that I would rent a car when we were on basketball road trips and help all the players.
Okay.
Actually, 3 players in the car with me, and with Jud as coach, people were fighting to get the 3 seats in my car. There was a lot of the senioritis going on. The seniors would pull rank on the younger players. There were a lot of great stories just from having those kids ride around with me. But so we get to the airport, and I go up to the counter to rent my car, and my driver's license had expired. So I couldn't rent the car. I was terrified about Jud, and Jud had a simple solution. He said, well, we'll just pack everybody into my cars. We have a practice tonight. And he said, you get there when you can, So I end up using pretty much all of my money to take a cab from SeaTac to Olympia, where Puget Sound was.
That's a long way.
Yeah, it's a long way. So, and of course, the first thing that happened was I had to go in with my head drooping and ask Jud if I could borrow some money from him so I could have meals while I was on the trip.
Oh.
But anyway, Jud and I had a good laugh about that. Some of the little side things that most people wouldn't know about. Football, Jack Swarthout was one of the finest gentlemen I've ever known. When we had the scandal, the so-called scandal at the university, when Jack and his wife finally left the university to move back to Washington, I remember I had an alone moment with Jack, and I said to him, Jack, everybody knew that this work-study thing went higher than you in terms of at the university. Why did you allow yourself to take all the heat? And he said, because if I hadn't, it might have destroyed the university. And that's the kind of man he was. I mean, he was a wonderful human being, and he did a great job of getting football turned around, at least for the time being there.
Bill, when did you start calling football?
Fall of 71.
What was your first, did you call some in high school, or did you just walk in kind of cold and start doing the play-by-play for football?
No, I did some high school football as well.
Okay.
I've done a little bit for Loyola. I just couldn't remember where they played at the time. But it might have been in the place. They have a Fox family living at one end of Ram Field now. So, but anyway, what I would do is Jack didn't like to do all the pregame shows. So he would have, not pregame, postgame. He would have Ron Nord, who used to be the basketball coach, eventually became an assistant football coach when he was replaced as basketball coach to hire Jud or somebody else. And so Ron and I would get together and do the pregame show. And then he would send an assistant coach on a rotational basis. So when we played Simon Fraser in British Columbia, it was actually my second year. We had just killed them, and we played them in Great Falls the years before and just slaughtered them, and we were heavily favored. The Grizzlies played terribly. the start of that game, Vern Argo, because we were playing a game in Canada, he ordered the phone line for that game very early, way ahead of time. We had the phone number, everything was all set up. I got to the stadium. We played in the giant pro stadium for some reason for that game. And when I go to my booth, there's no line. So I had to, whoever was in charge of the press box, I said, you've got to get somebody out here to install my line. In order to play the pregame show, I went into the booth next door that had a phone. I called the station and held the mouthpiece of the phone over my tape recorder to play the pregame show.
Yeah.
And then after the game, the Grizzlies played terribly. They lost to Simon Fraser. And the coach, I won't mention his name, but the coach they sent up to do the post-game show was the one I would least have liked to have in that situation. Isn't that the way it always works? And so anyway, I had no idea how to get into an interview after a game like that, especially with this guy. And so I said, Bill, just your thoughts on the game. And his immediate response was, we were the shits. So
back in the day when that word really wasn't allowed.
Yes, but the thing that hit me almost right away was, one, his answer was correct. Two, by that time, I didn't think we probably had many people still listening. And there was a third. Now, what was the third? It didn't really matter. But anyway, that was the only time that foul language ever got on the air in that type of a situation. There were others later that I couldn't avoid.
One included me, but we won't talk about that. But Argo did call me the next day. He was like, what in the hell went on? But speaking of Argo, he was talking, I don't know if you remember Scott Cady, the commander, who was with us as a part-timer for many years, and he actually was doing a lot of the board work early on for the Grizzly games for you. Yeah. In fact, I think it's actually Dr. Cady now, or a PhD Cady. But he remembered the story. So apparently he walked away right at the same time that you went to a break. So the way this works is the board announcer mutes you, basically. They turn you down and then they play the commercial. If he's not in the room, that doesn't happen, and you remain live on the air. Do you know the story I'm referring to?
No. So that didn't go on the air?
Well, what went on the air was your conversation, probably with one of your color guys, around the cheerleaders on the other side of the on the opposing side.
This was later, yeah.
I'm sure it was quite a bit later. Yeah. And then your beloved wife had your back, and she called Cady, and she was like, "What the hell?"
See, I never knew that. Well, she was a blessing too. She had my back a lot in the 52 years we were married. But that's funny. Now that's something that can very easily happen.
Yeah,
it's happened to me and happened to other people as well. And that once we get past
that's the thing is we were working off of time, and okay, at this this particular time, Bill will go live, so you need to be there for him. And then from that moment on, it's you and me and you in a stopwatch going, okay, I'm on break, 60 seconds, and then I'm going to come back live. And you were always there right on time. But that's the way radio worked. It was a feed coming in from a landline that usually hooked up to the Marty, as I recall, at least in the field house at one point.
Yeah, the Marty was a direct antenna. It wasn't a phone line. Yeah. Okay. We used that sometimes, but we didn't really use that a lot when I was doing the games.
Okay.
Later on, when I did high school games after 2011, we used it a little bit.
Oh, interesting. All right, Bill.
So
what else you got? I mean, we've got a lot.
there were so many players over the years, and the Grizzlies' record was up and down sometimes and so forth. And but we had so many tremendous football players that went on. Some of them went on to the pros and so forth, but just really good people that I've enjoyed conversations with when the opportunity arose. Since then, a couple of things. There was another football player. Well, no, I'm not going to use that story. I can't use that story. But
that's fine.
I was going to mention Marty Morningweg.
Yeah, he's had a great career.
Yeah, he had a great career, and he was built like a linebacker. He had a linebacker mentality, and I remember one game we had and he, late in the game, we were driving for what would be the winning touchdown, and he ran with the ball, and he wasn't particularly fast, but he was a block, and there was a linebacker waiting for him about the 2-yard line, and instead of swerving, Marty just ran him over, and we won the game. And I remember on the flight back, and maybe it wasn't that exact game, but I remember a flight coming back from a football game on the road. Marty would cramp up on the airplane. And I remember one game, he was writhing around in the walkway on the bus going to the airport and screaming and all of this. And whenever we got on the bus, without question, the person sitting next to me ended up being either an offensive tackle or a defensive end, somebody huge that just kind of wedged me, and I didn't get the window seat.
Of course not.
There were some players, and I don't know if this still goes on, none of my business, but I remember one time one of the players sat down, and of course they'd just been in a game and gotten beaten up and all this kind of stuff. And this one player has his little jock bag with him, and he reaches in and pulls out a small bottle of whiskey or something, and I took a couple of swigs out of it, very discreetly, looking around everything. So that was kind of interesting. But just
little self-medication.
Yeah, medication. So, and then, I've got to go back to basketball and the UCLA game. What a thrill that was, and the performances that Eric Hayes had in the semifinals in Pullman, and then in Oregon in the divisional final were just incredible. But that game obviously meant a lot to everybody.
It did.
Nobody thought it would ever happen. Ken McKenzie, who was our center, Crazy Canuck, we used to call him, was a heck of an athlete and a heck of a player. A little bit off the wall, personality-wise, which made him much more enjoyable. But he had one of those games. He had a great jump hook. He must have had 5 or 6 jump hook shots that went in and out. And we lose the game, by 3? And
right.
You can never predict that if he'd made 4 of those, we would have won the game, but at least we would have made it even more interesting. But that was a great thrill to do that, and then I got to meet John Wooden at a press conference before the game, and he and Eric Hayes, of course, became great friends after that. Eric's family went.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
Eric's family went to visit him in California, and so that was fun.
Hey, Bill, on a game like that, where did you get to sit? Where did you call the game from?
Courtside.
Courtside?
Yes.
What's your preference, courtside or up above?
I don't really prefer one or the other. The best thing about the worst thing about being courtside is how much you get blocked a lot of times by the coach. Yeah, the coach is walking up and down, and you're put right next to the Grizzly bench, even on the road, except for one occasion, which I'll talk about. So that was the worst part about being. You got a better feel for the game maybe down there.
Yeah,
but,
it's a different game.
Up above, you were free. You had to use a crowd mic, which was easy to do. So, yeah, I mean,
I'm trying to recall. Did you call courtside? I'm sorry. Did you call courtside in the field house in Adams Field House, or was it up above? I can't remember.
Very seldom, very little at courtside over the years.
Okay.
I may have started courtside, but then they did one of their several remodels, and with the press box was up above the balcony on the west side of the court, and that we were up there for quite a few years, and it was good. Getting a coach to come up there after the game usually took a little more time for the post game show, so that was the benefit of being courtside. That was another benefit of being courtside, was it was easier access for the coach. A couple of interesting stories. I did an editorial piece on a Boise State player who was a particularly dirty player, but a really good player, and now his name is gone. But anyway, I did an on-air editorial on the radio station as part of a sportscast, kind of deriding this guy. And so Bus Connor was the coach at Boise State.
Yep, I remember that name.
Bus got wind of my comments. And so after a game against Boise in Dahlberg Arena, Bus showed up in the press box. And
no kidding.
Yeah. And so he started talking about this. Such and such wasn't a bad guy, and he was just a great competitor. And I said, such and such a guy was a thug. And Eric Hayes is the example of a competitive player. And once again, that was it. Bus turned around and left. And after that, we became really good friends. I'd see him a lot, and it was like nothing had ever happened. So another time, I don't know if you remember the name Mike Kekich. He was a baseball player that started in Missoula with Legion ball, moved to California, had a great arm, a little bit wild. And he ended up eventually getting drafted, and he was playing for the New York Yankees. And do you remember the wife swapping thing with the Yankees?
Vaguely.
Two of the players swapped wives, and Mike was one of them. So he got a lot of notoriety out of that. Long story short, I was doing a basketball game up above in Dahlberg Arena, and after the game, Mike Kekich walked in just to say hi. And so that was a lot of fun. He didn't stay for a very long time, but it was good to see him, and I haven't seen him since. He's been invited to our high school reunions because he was in our class when he transferred out to California, but he's never come up. His brother Brian still lives in Missoula, but I played Babe Ruth League baseball with Mike, and when you played Little League against him, you were terrified to bat. The distance between the pitcher and the catcher in Little League is nothing, and I went to bat, and I think he hit me in the ankle with a pitch one time. But anyway, I really enjoyed the friendship with him.